Thank you very much for taking the time out today of your evening to join me. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to come and talk at today's Agile Roundabout. My name's Sara Chokr. I'm currently a product manager and tribe lead at iTech, of which I've had the privilege of being part of their incredible journey from startup as architect number 8 to the present time as where we're in a rapidly growing scale up with lots of big ambitions and missions to achieve. So today my talk is going to be on my experiences of product management in a pandemic and what we've learned and how we've adapted to our new normal. And I'll be sharing my top 3 lessons learned from pandemic working, split out between 3 high-level themes, that being people, product, and process. Because at iTech we believe these all go hand in hand, and we need these all to work together in order to achieve our goals and purpose. But before I proceed into those lessons, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how we're currently set up. So this is like my whistle-stop tour of the overview of our setup, and it goes as follows. We do currently operate in an adapted version of the Spotify model of squad, tribes, and chapters. And I want to be really clear that it is the adapted model. And the reason we work in this format is because we run a portfolio of websites and infrastructure services that power them, all with slightly different purposes, but with us all being aligned to the same mission. Squads and tribes are formed and scaled around these products and services and are prioritized by highest value, biggest potential, and most notable growth. When it comes specifically to product management at iTech, as we all are in product, our remit is to set the strategic vision and goals for each product while aligning back to the overall company mission and ultimately being a guiding force of turning strategy into action. And lastly, and what's ultimately probably makes our setups slightly more unique than others in the industry that do practice squads and tribes, is that our squads are truly cross-functional. We generally tend to try and keep squads under 11 people, but in any one squad you could have up to 7 cross-functional disciplines, and that's because we believe that by merging these disciplines, it aids self-sufficiency, autonomy, and greater levels of collaboration. But that's enough on what our setup is. I'm now going to move on into what the actual lessons were that we learned over the last 6 months. And the first place I'm going to start is around product management and process. And I'm going to start with this quote here, Agile, the ability to think and understand quickly. So lesson number 1 has been dubbed the need to be seen. The tribe's alignment to our strategy when entering our pandemic journey at iTech actually wasn't our biggest challenge, because prior to that, as a company, we've been working using the framework of OKRs for nearly 3 years. And yes, there's definitely refinements that we had to make there's definitely refinements we needed to make to ensure that these OKRs and alignment, these OKRs align to a fully distributed team. But actually the obstacle we actually faced was more to do about delivering that value. So as you can see, there's a little rocket on our screen, and that rocket represents one of our 4 core values, which is shipping greatness. And shipping greatness at iTech is ultimately our commitment to delivering quality and value to our users, which this specific tribe that I'm talking to you about is known for doing at a very top-notch level. But moving into the lesson that was actually learned, the kind of strange behavior that we ultimately saw in the first 4 to 6 weeks was we could see and we could hear that people were doing incredible amounts of work, but the outcomes were getting fewer and further apart. So we decided to investigate, and for every product manager at iTech, we have an amazing delivery lead by our side. And we decided to look under the hood. And what we could see quite blindingly, obviously, was that our issue was ultimately to do with work in progress. So work in progress, as you will all know, can be the single biggest driver or killer of productivity for any team in any company anywhere in the world. But we were a bit confused by it because on the surface, it was interesting because ultimately we hadn't changed the way we've been working from pre-pandemic times, and there's nothing had ultimately changed outside of kind of normal reprioritization that happens. So we decided to gather some feedback across the tribe, and what we came to realize was that everyone, and I mean everyone, was suffering from an acute case of needing to prove I'm doing loads of work from home itis. And basically what that meant was that there was a lot of anxiety people were experiencing from the outside world, and they were funneling this into their inside work life. And there was the ultimate fear that people were worried they weren't going to be seen to be delivering work or value. So effectively what they did was pull every ticket they could into in progress, so they could be seen to be looking like they were as busy as possible. So how did we actually rectify it? It's pretty simple. I'm definitely not going to acclaim any form of rocket science here. We went back to basics and did a refresh. The reason we were able to do that refresh is because we fed back with data, and by having that data, it meant that we were able to have informed decisions from an impartial standpoint that wasn't just opinion. And then additionally, with the team, we came up with a new process and agreed and re-reviewed and committed to some quite extreme versions of work in progress limits. But ultimately, what we were able to showcase is that this, to the team in a short time, is that less was more. So the less they had in progress in any given moment, the more value they ultimately delivered. And also that we trusted them, and trust was definitely a big factor that we had to nurture in this new evolving world of pandemic working. But as a product manager, always looking to reflect on my own practices, and I became aware that I had to be even more ruthless with prioritization and really get it down to the leanest possible ways. And then the last thing, which was something we did to kickstart, and it's a tool we've used really well in the last year, but it was the notion of swarms. And effectively, by implementing a swarm on something that was really high priority and slightly behind in terms of timeline, effectively rebooted and got and kind of gave the team a bit of a kickstart to get them back on track. So the benefits from swarming that we see is that is by aligning squads to a common goal under you see greater team unity. There's a lot more creativity and free time to do idea generation. And additionally, people had greater feelings of adding value. And I don't just want you to take my word from it. This came from an engineer within the team today, where we told them we're planning a swarm for next week. Yay, a swarm. So that's come right from the user, it come right from the mouths of the tribe. So that was lesson number one. So lesson number two, we're now going to discuss about product management and people. And as I said at the top of the session, we're aware that people are the heart of what we do. This great quote from Roald Dahl ultimately will underpin the lesson that we will discuss shortly. But just to kind of put it out there before we go into that, if you have great thoughts, they will shine up your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely. So what does that actually mean for lesson two? So lesson two for me was actually one about validation, and effectively what it was is our existing feedback loops had served us really well and prepared us really well. So people experience at iTech is the core of how we operate. And it's not, and I don't just mean within tribes or squads, but as a company as a whole. And as part of our agile evolution on the run up to pandemic, we'd already put in place the relevant ceremonies and cadences to gather feedback from our architects. So our core approach to people at iTech is, from what we know, is if our purpose is to delight our users, then we also need to delight our people and create safe, fun working environments for them to thrive and achieve against our mission. And as a tribe lead, without these cadences in place and support from amazing teams like our delivery chapter and our people experience chapter, I would have truly struggled to support and nurture a tribe ecosystem in a virtual setting. Giving and receiving feedback is actively encouraged in our company culture, and by that being nurtured pre-lockdown and pre-pandemic life, it meant that those behaviours were already in place for when we actually went into this new unknown. And so, with specifically to do with tribes and squads at the moment, our current cadences revolve around retros and really well-structured retros, sprint health checks and OKR retros. And quite simply, the way we commit to actioning any of our feedback is we don't try and solve all the world's problems in one go. We commit to a top theme and we agree on solutions together. And an example of stuff that we've trialed off the back of such feedback in the last 6 months were things like focus days, AKA no meeting days, AKA a Zoom free day. And as we all know, Zoom fatigue is a real medical illness. The other one we also introduced was the opt-out emoji for non-compulsory meetings. And effectively, it was an emoji you can dump in the chat without any questions. You can opt out of that meeting for that day if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed with all the communication and meetings you've been in. And obviously, we chose the eggplant emoji. So, and this now brings us on to my last lesson, and this is literally product management and products. And the quote to underpin this our third lesson is one from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it had taken place already. So lesson number 3 was knowledge sharing in a pandemic was hard. And I can't iterate this enough. It was a massive struggle. And as product managers, especially at iTech, knowledge sharing is at the heart of what we do, as we have a duty to our squads, the chapters, and our product colleagues to keep them as informed as possible about our users and markets that we operate in, to give the clarity and rationale behind the priorities and decisions we make, and actually give people, additionally, the platform to feed back into them as well. So what we observed was that in a time when information sharing was an absolute overdrive and people were overstimulated and overwhelmed with everything that was going outside in the outside world, this was also happening in the inside world, because back to the point earlier about how people were wanting to make sure they looked like they were doing a lot of work by pulling tickets into work in progress. We were seeing the same pattern with how people are trying to communicate, set up meetings, and generally do this knowledge sharing exercise, which allows us to facilitate and create great experiences for our users. So effectively, what we learned was that over communication can actually be as ineffective as under communication. And what we are doing to solve this, and I speak about this in the present tenses because this is something we are actively working on and looking to drive further. So if you have any additional suggestions after this chat, please post it to me or find me on LinkedIn. But effectively, there's 3 themes that we're focusing on. The first one is making knowledge sharing specific and purposeful. And the thing I tasked the product managers that now work in the tribe that I'm in iTech is when they're putting together sessions, meetings, syncs, even communications that go into a Slack channel or an email, effectively, I'm tasking them with what is the one thing you want everyone to leave knowing today, and make sure they focus on landing that message specifically. Timing is everything, to my second point. So timing in terms of not putting big workshops in at the end of a day when you have had an 8-hour day on Zoom, not trying to land a bit of information in an email during the middle of the day when everyone's super busy and they've been spammed with loads of other stuff. Timing is everything. And it's I'm also trying to encourage product managers that we currently work with to push back workshops. If you're not gonna get the right attention and focus on a workshop tomorrow, push it back. And then the last point, which is my favorite point and actually isn't specifically related and isn't just a character in Sesame Street, but is using the concept of ELMO. So ELMO is the acronym for Enough, Let's Move On. ELMO isn't about us shutting people down, but what it is coupled with parking lots. It's a really effective and fun way to respectfully acknowledge and respectfully acknowledge, but put a raised topic on hold for a later point. And also, additionally, one of the bonus tips that we've definitely seen really usefully used is leveraging such tools like Loom. And where we've seen this work really well is with our designers when they're talking through the rationale and the UX of the wireframes they've put together, which don't always translate that well in a Jira ticket, on a Figma link, or actually warrant another phone call separately. And then one of the big things that we've already put in place that has been super impactful was actually we increased our cadence for squad demos. So what we found that actually knowledge sharing and it was landing better when shared by peers. And what we also see, the other byproducts of this that we also saw was increased team unity across the whole tribe, with everyone celebrating each other. People coming forward more often with new ideas and wanting to add and improve and increment. And a little bit of friendly competition between the squads that sparked a lot of energy as well. So that was that was lesson number 3. These were just the 3 top lessons of many that we've learned from over the last 6 months. And I would definitely, I definitely could have gone on for about 2 or 3 more hours with everything else that may have happened and actually went wrong and we fixed. But the last 6 months definitely haven't been without their challenges, but fundamentally, having those core agile and product management principles that were laid in our evolution in the 12 months prior to the pandemic, prior to lockdown, ultimately equipped us to navigate an ambiguous and unknown future of working in a pandemic. But to put it simply, to put it as simple as this, by ensuring that there is a core framework that informs your process and having clear values that people can relate to and be guided by, and a clearly stated mission that powers and inspires your product purpose, it doesn't actually matter if you're in a pandemic or not. It's essentially a lot easier to adapt, evolve and learn in a time where change is constant when you have those anchors reliably in place. So I'm going to leave you with a final thought that was shared with me a few weeks ago by an agile consultant that works with us at iTech. And it is a reminder that pandemic working isn't what remote working was. So it's our time as product managers and people involved in squads to learn, to experiment and revolutionize for our new normal. So thank you very much for listening to me today. Obviously, as you already know, my name's Sara Chokr. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Please do follow us at iTech Media. And we have a lot of careers going on. So check out our page if you're interested in what we do, and get in touch if you want to find more.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really informative talk there, and it's good to hear how iTech have what iTech have been doing in product management over these last few months. So yeah, we'll take some questions if you want to ask any questions at the moment, and just hit them up on the Q&A function. Also, we like to do Kirsten. I'm just wondering if you had any questions for Sarah as well on that particular talk.
And apologies for that. Was just quickly finding the mute button there. Yeah, that was extremely interesting, and I completely relate to so many of the things you were talking about, particularly around the point for knowledge transfer and sharing information. Yeah, completely relate on that challenge. Were there other things that maybe didn't work so well that you tried in that space?
Oh, so many different things, to be honest. The list is long, and actually, if I'd had a bit longer, I probably would have put a failed section in here. There is a lot of stuff around. One of the things that didn't contribute, that contributed to that kind of information fatigue, shall we say, was that I thought, if I sent something in a Slack channel, then backed it up with the Confluence document, and then sent it in an email, somehow it'd land. But it was a waste of my time, and B, people just didn't read it. So it's that sort of stuff. But actually, one of the positives that did come out of lockdown, and I don't know if you've experienced this in your teams with them being fully remote, there's something to be said around everyone being remote, putting everyone on the same playing field. So when we did do really well facilitated sessions, the people that were usually the quietest in the room, because we were able to adapt with stuff like Miro, it effectively means that they actually came out of their shell a bit more, and you got a lot more contributions when you actually nurtured that environment. But it's actually about honing the skill of nurturing a virtual world, basically.
Oh, absolutely, and quite a good tool, Mira.
Yeah, yeah, it's my best friend. So.
We have one question from Satinder. So they ask, did you conduct communication audits to see if the messages hit home?
Not yet, but we're actually in the process of doing that. One of the tricks we actually did do is that our teams, my tribe specifically, well, not my tribe, but the tribe I work in, iTech specifically, is very fond of a quiz. So started using kind of stuff like Menti or Kahoot to actually help land the messaging. But that's a really good shout. So I'll definitely be adding that to my list of things to do for next season.